The intro should be like
we are Flashback 64.
Oh.
Your biological and technological distinctiveness will be potted.
Let's just go with that, actually. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Flashback 64, a special Trek log. I am your queen, Goo-Cutus of Borg, and I'm joined, as always, by my hive mind, McKenna. Hey, McKenna.
Hello.
I should have thought of, actual things to say in the beginning that were references, but I didn't think of it.
We should have, you should have written a script and we could have all said it at the same time.
Yes.
Yeah, and we could have auditioned. We could have, I could have practiced. I could have, gotten into a little costume or something.
We really botched this. Oh, boy.
Dang it.
I'm one of three right now. You'll get that eventually. Adriel. Hey, how's it going, Adriel?
Hi. I'm so happy to be back here. I've had a crazy couple of weeks. I was traveling for work. I was just madness. And I'm so happy to just get to watch some Trek, some curated Trek, and to just talk with my buds. So I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, pretty stoked about this one. I feel like we kind of threw Adriel a little bit more into the fire with this one.
I think so a little bit, but they felt more, we'll get into it, but it felt a lot more like I was watching a continuous movie almost. All of these episodes really went together in a more cohesive way than the Data or the Worf ones, which kind of felt like a sampling of the character development and the background, whereas this one really felt like, there was a beginning, middle, and end even within the curated series of episodes. So this was cool.
Yeah, this is definitely like a more overarching story than a character study.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, yeah, and I guess also the kind of featured episode is much more like a big movie than some of the other stuff we've covered, right? So
yeah,
but I guess part of the reason I felt like we kind of threw you into it is we're sort of talking about two different things here. We're talking about a little bit of Q, and then a little bit of Borg. And we kind of skipped a little bit of introductory for the former character, and the reason being is because when I kind of wanted to cut to the chase a little bit, because this was we were talking about ways to start talking about Star Trek on the show, and I sort of just thought Best of Both Worlds, which we'll talk about more in depth, would have been a good place to start, because it's kind of like the kickoff of Star Trek being really big in the 90s. This is when this show came into its own and everything. So that was our original kind of let's start there. But then when it became let's show Adriel some episodes, we're like, well, let's get a little bit more context on some of the characters and stuff. So but that being said, we skipped a little bit of Q, introducing the Q character, who was introduced in the pilot of the show, and stuff like that. So we kind of, I don't know if that I did give you a little bit of a primer, some spark notes. I don't know if did you feel lost or anything at first when we were watching this?
I did not. There was a moment where I was a bit not confused, but I was curious about the relationship between the Borg and Q. But I feel like that got resolved or became less important as the stories kind of went on. But no, I did not. I feel like Q sort of needs no introduction, okay. In a way.
Well, shoot.
Q, it's very clear that Q is this I don't know if it's godlike, maybe, I think is perhaps the word that you used, but that it's this omnipotent or very, very powerful being or character, and that they have an agenda and they're putting Picard and humanity through its paces. And so I think that like it didn't seem like I needed to know more than that. And it worked out just fine knowing what I knew.
Okay, perfect. Then that's great to hear. Though, okay, like you said, he needs no introduction, because my next note was, what is Q? But then you kind of hit it. So, yeah, there were 2 previous episodes that, I mean, we've watched them a few times now. I mean, I enjoy them, but he was originally created for the pilot because they wanted it to be a 2-part episode. So they I believe the studio encouraged Gene Roddenberry to come up with more. So he created, they kind of had a normal Star Trek mission in the first episode, and then they added Q on top of it as sort of this like more, I guess, meta, like he's watching them on their typical Star Trek mission and sort of judging them. So it was kind of created as filler, but obviously, I mean, we love, we should just say the actor John Delancey, who's he's a regular on Star Trek playing Q over the years. He continues to be on, and I think we're both pretty big fans of him. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He has a great, him and Patrick Stewart, I think, have a really good back and forth, wouldn't you say? Mm-hmm. You can tell they're both like high trained actors.
Yeah. They both have a very commanding presence too.
It reminds me of when I did theater in like high school and college, and like there was like always these exercises where you'd be like, step forward if like you are like in charge of the scene, not you as the actor, but like if your character is like, and then like a lot of the best scenes are the ones where there's a lot of jockeying back and forth and there's clear knowledge of like who holds power in the scene. And it felt like I was like watching that exercise happen with these 2 actors, which was pretty cool.
Definitely. Yeah. So they introduced him in the pilot, and it was sort of the premise you said of like, they're sort of judging humanity, and we will talk about the pilot eventually. I think it might be fun in conjunction to do it with the last episode of the show. So we'll come back to it.
Yeah. That's a great idea. I also do think that we should talk about the pilot for sure.
But even when they bring him back in the second season, I believe, or is it the first? The episode Hide and Q, they bring him back and they do sort of this thing where he tries to offer Riker Q powers to win him over, and it's even in that episode, it's a little silly. It's a little like early season TNG cheese, but even in that, like, I remember there's a scene where Picard and Q are like quoting Hamlet to each other, and it's just so sick. You're just like, this is what it's all about. So
next time on Star Trek The Next Generation, the evil Q returns.
What do you want, Q? My purpose is to join you.
No. And Picard faces Q's wrath when the Enterprise is hurled into a living nightmare.
We have an intruder.
Now the crew is helpless against an invincible race of alien killing machines.
You can't outrun them. You can't destroy them.
On Star Trek The Next Generation.
But I thought, let's cut to the chase, because I really wanted to get to this other stuff with the Borg, which is, you were kind of not sure how they were connected, but they're not really connected. This was just sort of a...
Right.
Yeah, that's what's kind of weird about it. But I think it all ties together in the end. So we're first going to talk about the episode Q Who, which is season 2, episode 16 of The Next Generation. It came out May 8th, 1989. And it was written by Maurice Hurley and directed by Rob Bowman, who we've talked about them both extensively. So, but this is it's safe to say it's just kind of a classic TNG situation here. But I also thought I've got some notes here. I wanted to kind of save McKenna from having to recap the whole episode, which she did a great job of.
She did it so well. Yeah.
But just so I'm going to sum it up here. I've pulled the synopsis from Memory Alpha, which is like the Star Trek wiki. So this is they say Q throws the Enterprise into uncharted space where it encounters and is engaged by a dangerous alien vessel of a previously unknown species, the Borg. When the vessel instantly and effortlessly overwhelms the Enterprise, Picard realizes that the Federation may not be as ready for the future as he thought.
Dun dun dun.
Dun, dun, dun. Yeah, actually, this episode I saw in theaters once when they did the it was this and Measure of a Man, because I caught it. They released like like new remasters of the seasons, and I think they did events for different ones, but I only happened to catch the season 2 one. But this was really sweet to see like this episode on the big screen. Sick. And Measure of a Man, of course, a beautiful episode. But yeah, we've got this is it. This introduces the character of the Borg to the show, and I guess Adriel, as a newcomer, what was your initial impression here?
So I went through a big phase where I watched a lot of Firefly, and I don't know if either of you have watched Firefly.
I have not. No.
Yeah, I have.
What? Really? You've never seen Firefly? That seems
no.
like a real classic one. We should watch that. I think you'd have fun with it. But anyway, I feel like I've seen it and you haven't, and yet I feel like you probably know more like about it in some way than I do. I feel like
I know
that's
a couple things.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, there are these characters, or like a group of. Well, they're not really people. I think they're called Weavers, but they are basically like space pirates, but they're way scarier than that, and they just sort of like will attack and like eat and maim people on random spaceships, and then like put their bodies on the outside of their spaceship, and it's like really graphic and crazy, and that they're like always kind of haunting the just the world once they're introduced, that you're like, oh, this is like a real threat, but it's not. It's like an existential sort of threat because there's no reasoning with them, and there's no outrunning them. It's just sort of trying to like, be silent enough that they won't notice you and stuff like that. Anyway, these were obviously very, very different because they were, the Borg in many ways are like the opposite of that because they're super, super powerful and all knowing. But they represented this same sort of like lone wolf threat to humanity and threat to the Enterprise that it was a comparison that I was drawing quite often as I was watching it. I don't know if anyone listening has watched both of these things and would agree or disagree, but they were similarly frightening, less gory and sort of like viscerally upsetting, but they felt like I couldn't understand their schema for what they like, what exactly they wanted and why they wanted it. And I think that was part of what made them really effective as an existential threat.
And that was partially due to the reason they were created, the reason they kind of envisioned this enemy was because they had, when they launched the show, they were trying to create a new nemesis. You didn't have Klingons were kind of allied with. They wanted to avoid the Romulans, which you're not fully introduced to, but they want to kind of avoid these classic Trek enemies because I think they wanted to set the show apart. So they created the Ferengi, which we mentioned the creator in our previous episode, and I guess we're gonna have to do a Ferengi episode. I feel like we maybe we'll go back and touch upon them, but they were not viewed upon as a very worthy successor. What do you feel about that, McKenna, as someone who's got a bit more background on Ferengi?
Yeah, they they work much better. Well, in Deep Space Nine, they're in there a lot.
Yeah,
I think the way that they're kind of used as like a it's the capitalist society.
Yeah, they kind of mock them more too. Like they tell some serious stories with them, but they do more silly comedic things, right?
Yeah, they're goofy.
They're goofy looking. They're not threatening like they imagined they would be. So yeah, they kind of thought they were trying with the Borg to come up with something that was like really threatening, and they were, like you said, Adriel, you couldn't understand like how you would really deal with them. I think they were trying to envision like an enemy that's like that, like, you know, we've watched plenty of episodes where they sort of talk themselves out of the situation, and they
can like be empathetic enough or outsmart them or reason with them enough, and like, or like find their way into some sort of like either common ground or like a solution that serves both parties in some way. Yeah, this is not that.
and that's why I think this is, I don't know, McKenna, do you think this is like from a structure of an episode? I feel like this is much different than your normal Star Trek episode, and introducing the Borg, I think it really plays into that, because like really it is Q shows up, they're like, Q, you suck, and he flings them out into the other side of the galaxy, and then they just learn like what the Borg is all about, and they can't beat them, and they just have to like beg Q to send them back, and that's the end. Like they don't overcome.
They don't get to solve. Yeah,
it's really like you don't often see. Even there's times where they fail and stuff like that, but there's some like sort of like satisfaction to it. But this is just like, no. They just had to like beg Q to.
They even kind of do it like twice in the episode, because at the beginning, Q like takes Picard away, and they don't know where he is. So Riker takes charge, and they're searching for him, and they don't find him. Q is the one who brings Picard back.
Yeah,
like they don't solve that either. It's like a little like mini thing at the beginning of the episode that precludes the rest of it.
And it's funny. It makes you wonder like what Q's motivations. I think it always changes because of like whoever's writing the episode and what kind of story they're trying to tell. But at this point, you're like, yeah, what is like Q? Like, what does he want, or what do they want, really? You know. Why is he?
Yeah, it feels like pretty foreboding, because there's no like the end of the episode, and again, I hadn't really tapped into the structure being quite different. But it's a good point. But I think that it helps to serve this feeling of like, well, they didn't really get out of this one. They just sort of by the good graces of Q, or Q wanting to like do something to them in the future, or like wanting them to owe him or something, you know. But yeah, it really doesn't. It feels like a defeat, a sort of uncharacteristic defeat.
There is always an element they have though of like maybe Q was like helping, because they're like, well, I guess now we know about them, so we can prepare. That's always the thing of like maybe Q's good, but we don't know.
Yeah,
is he good? Is the continuum? That's something that gets explored more, I guess. But it's sometimes, and I will say, way down the line, sometimes when they start answering that stuff, you're sort of like, it's kind of better when you don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, when they start getting into Q politics in like Voyager, you're like, what's going on? What's Q's deal? But they do get some time on this episode to spend just sort of like learning about the Borg, and like just literally like watching and analyzing them and learning about them. And I guess for anyone listening who doesn't know, McKenna, how would you describe the Borg?
So I think the way they're initially described is like slightly different from how they end up, but more or less they're like a collective hive mind. They behave as One, they have assimilated entire societies and their technology into their collective. So, like, their technology is super advanced, and they're able to adapt to anything, like, pretty much immediately.
Mhm.
So they're very difficult to disarm, and their entire goal is just to improve their technology by assimilating that of everyone else's. And they just cannot be reasoned with. They just assimilate. That is their goal.
Yeah. It is fairly spooky. I especially think early on, like in these in these episodes in particular, like they lack like almost a personality, you know, so that's what makes them really freaky as villains, you know.
Yeah, and it's funny because there was like they had been because they're like humanoid, and especially because they have that scene where there's like the baby Borgs, like little
yeah, it's really
human babies that are
disturbing.
in little drawers. And that they're like crying, and you can hear babies crying. I was like, what am I watching? This feels like way creepier than other Star Trek stuff that we've seen. So like, they're a different like, race or whatever, a different like kind of being, but they are humanoid in that they grow up and that they grow older in some way, even though we don't really know how. But they're not just like, they don't just come out looking like fully formed beings. They have some sort of a life cycle, or they start as little babies, which is really, really crazy. Really crazy. That detail, like, again, is something that I don't need or want to be solved. I think that it can just exist as a scary detail, and it just like does more work by just being a fact that doesn't need to be explained,
There's elements of body horror there.
Yeah.
I'm just like I've got a collage of elements of the Borg. Another is it's like got a cool like industrial cyberpunk sort of vibe.
Yes.
You could see this in like a Nine Inch Nails music video or something.
100%. Very like Matrix.
Yeah.
Matrix adjacent too. Yeah.
Oh yeah. They're kind of plugged. They're all kind of plugged into this hive mind thing in their little pods. Really cool design. Really, the people who worked on the show and did the designs are incredible. I love this is one. All the episodes have this, but there's that sort of thing where they'll show them on a deck inside the Borg cube, and then they'll zoom out, and it's like composited into this giant matte painting of inside the cube. It looks so awesome.
It looks so sick. They did such a good job with that.
And then the cube itself is such a cool design, right? Like
just a cube. It's like
why? Yeah, like why bother with anything else?
Yeah, it's just like I don't know. They don't need it to be any different than that.
I have some elements on like specific parts of this episode, but overall, I feel like that we kind of described like that is the plot. Is like, oh, the Borg, cyborg guys, scary. But I have little details, like you were messaging me about this scene, Adriel, in the beginning of the episode where we're introduced to Ensign Sonia Gomez, played by Leisha Naff, who I think I don't know if you knew this, but you might appreciate that she is also in the film Total Recall, She
Oh,
she
God,
plays
hell yeah.
the woman with 3 breasts in Total Recall.
That's her?
Yeah.
That rules. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't realize that, but I mean that's a classic character that lives rent free in my memory. So this is awesome. Because Sonia Gomez also is like she's stuck out.
I know. It's unfortunate because I think she's only in the episode that comes after this, and then they brought her back in one of the seasons of Lower Decks, the newer like animated show. So that was nice to see her.
Yeah.
we were happy to see her back. I like Sonia Gomez. I believe I had read she was introduced like as a potential love interest for Geordi, but
Yeah, it does give that vibe a little bit.
though he seems kind of annoyed with her too. I was like,
I mean, he's not good with
right. That could have been interesting to explore more, right? But instead, I think, well, Adrielle, you might think maybe she's a better love interest for Picard.
Yes. I was like, what am I watching? I was like, is this like the beginning scene is so strange. Like, it's so stilted in the way that like adult films are stilted.
Yeah.
That like, I was like, is this going to be are they all going to wake up, or you know what I mean? Like, is it some sort of a meta thing?
Because that
I was like,
happen.
this is so yeah, exactly. I was like, maybe this is like, an alternate whatever. It's like some Star Trek thing where then they all are like, oh, that was me under the influence of whatever, or on this other timeline.
Do you
want
to do the play-by-play of what happened?
I don't remember. The main thing is that Ensign Gomez, right? Her name's Gomez. She's like talking with Riker, right? Or is it with
Geordi? They're in engineering.
It's with Geordi. Okay, they're in engineering.
He's
anyway,
like, hey,
she has
hot
like
chocolate in engineering.
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, she has hot chocolate, and then he's like, "You can't have that. You can't have that here." And she's like, "Oh, sorry," and then turns around and then like spills it all over Captain Picard, and he's like, "Oh, you spilled all over me."
Oh, it's all over you, Captain.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's all over me.
It's all over me, Ensign.
Yes.
Don't tell the Admiral.
Stand there. You're like, are they going to take their clothes off? What's happening?
I'll do anything if you won't tell the Admiral. That's what was going to happen.
It was so crazy. And then it just moved to another scene. I was like, wait, what?
We're gonna watch the Ryza episode, the Picard Ryza episode.
Yeah, if you want to have some
Ooh.
horny Picard
Or maybe
thoughts.
some Enterprise episodes.
Well, that's
I want more of whatever that was. I wanted more of it because it was so crazy. And then it just like they never talked about it. And I was like, why is that how the episode started?
That was literally
like, why was that in there?
I think, and I always can appreciate it for what they're going for. That she's like nervous and she's unsure. And I do like seeing characters like that in Star Trek who are like a bit more down to earth and like relatable. As long as it's not
kind of like gives you a reference for like how calm the crew members are, Geordi and Picard, and then how like unsettled they are at the end of the episode.
Yeah.
That's a charitable way of thinking about this scene, and it's how it's working in the episode. Because I was just like, I mean, I don't know if it's just a me problem, but I was like, this is like someone else has made a different version of this scene.
Well, I like Gomez. I think she's cute and nice.
Yeah, I liked her too. She was cool.
I like that. I like that she becomes like a captain. That's cool. In the animated, it's nice to know that things worked out for her. Is all I'm saying. So, nice, nice character, I guess. We also in this episode, I love this where so after Picard gets taken off the ship, which is a cool scene on its own, like where they're kind of he just appears in the shuttlecraft and Q's got him and like they're trying to figure out what's going on the bridge. And I like that, especially based on the previous encounter with trying to recruit Riker, that when he hears like all this is going on, he gets a little like kind of like look on his face where he's like, I know who's fucking doing this, you know. It's cute.
Yeah.
But I like when they come back and he brings them back to 10 Forward, that Guinan is there. And this is so
I was going to
awesome.
bring up Guinan. Guinan is such a, she plays such a great role in like all of these episodes, but especially this one.
She's like such a MVP of the show, I feel like. But
Yeah.
we find out they have like she has history with Q. She knows him. She obviously knows about the Borg. But that first scene where they like encounter each other and they start doing like wizard poses or whatever.
Yes. Oh, that was another part that I was like, I was watching this with my neighbor, and both of us kept looking over at each other, and we're like, this is unlike any episode that I've seen of Star Trek. She was like, this is really stands out as being like extra fun and crazy. Like the wizard hands and them like squaring off against each other. It's just like, oh, it was so awesome. It really, really stood out in the episode.
Because Guinan, it's like, you know, they do a good job, at least for, I think, or at least all of TNG, of not really like totally giving away like what her full story is, right? Like you probably say, kind of like we kind of get these little tidbits that you just don't expect. She's kind of like mysterious. Yeah, like you know, like there's this implication she's like old friends with Picard. You know, I guess we learn like her species was attacked by the Borg. But yeah, we don't quite understand, at least early on, like what her species is, and like, yeah, it's, I don't know, it's interesting. It's a cool thing for a character, because then she can just kind of like come in to something and like become an important part, even though she's like not part of the crew. You know, she just works on the ship. So. I just love that shit.
Yeah, I also thought that it was cool because she's so magnetic, you know, Whoopi Goldberg is, and like as a character she's so mysterious but so like sort of understated, but like clearly very, very like knows a lot more than she's letting on. And because the Borg are, like as McKenna said, like their goal is just to like absorb and assimilate and like subjugate, and not even subjugate, but like to just like take what they want from other societies and then like use it to their own benefit. It kind of made me feel like, oh, like the Borg are like she's like sort of part of them, you know. Obviously she doesn't feel an affinity towards them and she feels antagonistic towards them, but like they attacked her people and like assimilated them or absorbed them or whatever. And so like, you know, there's an element of like who she is that is also part of the Borg, which makes the Borg even more threatening, I think, because she's kind of a formidable character herself. So I thought that like element to the whole thing was cool. Plus the way that she was like squaring off with Q, which was cool. So, and like, I don't really know that there's lots of missing parts to the puzzle about Guinan, but I thought that was a like really effective part of the whole thing for me.
Yeah. There's sort of like, well, she survived the Borg. She can square off with Q. Like, what's her power level, you know?
Right.
But also,
yeah,
just like that does add more context to her too. Like we were thinking of in Measure of a Man, where she was kind of talking to Picard about slavery and stuff like that, where like you kind of find that her people were like, they're sort of like, they have their own like galactic diaspora a little bit, you know. They don't have like their home was destroyed by we saw like the Borg, how they just like scoop up the cities from the planets. Like that's terrifying on its own. That image, another like really cool piece of art that they have there is that. But yeah, it gives her, and it also, it's like with her character then, the idea of like she does like kind of have a special connection with a lot of the crew, but Picard specifically, in a way that he doesn't have with a lot of, you don't see it often in other shows or episodes where he's like, friend, like he doesn't go to the poker games. You never see him there, but he will like consult with Guinan, which is pretty, I don't know, that's like a unique connection on the show that I think it helps that it's not like a crew person, She also is the one he is consulting in the end of the episode, which I think is a really creepy ending where they're like, yeah, it's cool, like now we know what to deal with, but they're out there. They're coming.
They're coming.
Next time on Star Trek The Next Generation, the evil-minded Q is back and desperate.
What is it you want, Q? Sanctuary on this ship.
His powers have been destroyed,
Help me!
leaving him a mere mortal.
Just one of the boys, eh?
Now, alien forces are out for the kill, and only the Enterprise stands in their way on Star Trek The Next Generation.
We can take a little break from the Borg if we want, and this is where we just go back to some more Q.
Yeah, let's get on to Q. More Deja Q.
Yeah, Deja Q is our next episode. Season 3, episode 13 from February 5th, 1990. We're in the 90s.
Yeah.
Woo!
Written by Richard Danis, who wrote a couple episodes of TNG and Deep Space Nine, and directed by Les Landau, who we talked about in our last episode, directed a ton of episodes. But the description is, Q is seeking asylum on the Enterprise after he has been thrown out of the continuum and stripped of his powers. So now we get to see Q be vulnerable, right? That's the premise of this episode. So I will say there's sort of like a lot of Q episodes, there's sort of a classic Star Trek situation happening that it's all sort of framed around. That I don't know if there's a ton you want to talk about here, but there's I believe it's the Burrell 4 moon is like what's going on with it? It's like
It's Majora's masking.
Yeah, it's gonna like
Yes.
and they're sort of like talking to these scientists who are complaining the whole time. They're like, we're gonna die, and they think maybe Q is causing the moon to come down or something, but it's really just something else is going on, and he's actually being honest. But I don't know. What do you think? Maybe I'm being too mean to them because they're all gonna die. But any thoughts on the Borellians? I don't know what to call them.
The Borellians reminded me of that one character in one of the Worf episodes where the guy, he was like a fish person who was like vaping the whole time. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, what are they called? The Benzites or Mordock and Marduk and whatever.
And he was like so earnest but so hapless, and I kept thinking he's bad news. Something bad's gonna happen with him, and then nothing bad happened with him at all. But these characters reminded me of him because they were sort of like also kind of like hapless and like didn't have like a huge personality, and I thought that maybe they had something that was like gonna like maybe they were related to Q or something, but like they turned it out to be not.
Yeah,
but they had the energy of that vaping fish guy to me.
Yeah, which I appreciate. I like that we just go talk to random like fish people.
I really like that. It makes it like so much more. It makes for writing that feels less predictable, which is cool. Like I feel like a lot of times when I'm watching these episodes, I really am genuinely like not sure what direction it's gonna go because like apart from the characters who like I know pretty well, like they're just thrust into these situations where like there isn't really a pattern necessarily for like who is introduced and like why. So I like it. I think that it's and it's not something that you see that often, because the scope of Star Trek is just like so big that they can like allow for like characters and new like creatures to just sort of exist and then not have to like mean that much, you know?
Yeah, because the galaxy is so large, we can just create societies, and they can just be one-offs and stuff. Do you have any strong feelings kind of about the Borellians?
Not really.
They're fine.
They're here for just setup.
Yeah,
pretty much.
Yeah.
Another thing that comes from the episode that I just want to briefly shout out is the Picard face palm, which is like a famous meme across the internet. But he does it here, and it's just, we love to see it. You can see why it becomes a meme. He's very convincing of his
it's really
his
good.
face palm. But let's talk about
it was good to see that meme in action, because I feel like I understand it even more now.
You feel the power of it, yeah.
Yeah,
it's like all the Simpsons memes.
I feel like it keeps happening with all the stuff we've been watching. I'll be like, oh, this is the meme.
Oh yeah, Starship Troopers. Yeah.
I almost didn't see it right away. Like I was watching it, but I was with my neighbor, and she was like, oh yeah, the meme, and I was like, oh right, that is the meme.
That's perfect.
Out of not seeing it as a GIF or whatever didn't even register. It's the same.
All right, let's talk about the real substance though. So Q, he chooses. He's kicked out of the continuum. I don't remember what the reasoning was, but he's kind of a troublemaker.
They're just
right?
they're mad at him. They're like, you are not upholding our ideals.
Yeah, which we don't quite know.
You're giving us a bad name.
What their ideals are necessarily, which is kind of fun. But yeah, he can finally join the crew, and he can experience human pains and needs. I guess so Adriel, you just had kind of really the one previous encounter with Q, but I feel like it does a good job of selling there's almost something cathartic about it a little bit. Did you feel that having seen him before, now we're doing something else with the character, something kind of interesting?
Yeah, well, and also having having familiarized myself with Data, who is not similarly not human, but Data is not human, and Data is jockeying with that reality a lot, being surrounded by people who have life cycles and pain, and and of course we talked about this in the Data episode, that Data does is written by humans, and therefore does have human proclivities and tendencies and logic. However, Data is struggling with that a lot, of being I'm not a person, or I don't feel anything. I don't have the same kinds of desires. So it was funny, or it was actually funny, haha funny, but it was also interesting to see this other character that is not like Data, more godlike or magical or something. And then they are they have been what's the word? Not subjugated, but they've been lowered to human status.
Disgraced is the word.
Yeah, disgraced.
Data says, you have earned in disgrace what I seek to become.
Exactly. So it was that was my favorite part about the whole thing, is because I feel like it seems like Data and Q are similar in that they both have all of these extra human powers, extra sensory powers that we could never understand, but that line in and of itself really puts them on different ends of the spectrum, and on the empathy spectrum as well. Q is fuck this is horrible, and Data's no, this is something that I'm I desire and am curious about. So yeah, that was my favorite part about the whole thing.
Oh yeah, it makes him the perfect chaperone for Q, really. Much like he was the buffer friend for Worf and Kalar in our previous episode.
Yeah. I want him to be my buffer friend all the time.
Then he almost is the perfect person to try to explain humanity to Q.
Yeah.
kind of has like this more outside perspective, but is living amongst and trying to emulate or become.
Right, yeah, he has like both this. They are, yeah, Adriel, you put it well. They're like perfect opposites almost, where they both lack like what is viewed as like the like understanding the core aspects of humanity, but Data's from more of a dispassionate but curious angle, right? Whereas Q is like this like fury, not like just this whirlwind of emotion. He has all the emotions, it seems, you know. They're just it's almost like a lore type thing where he's just like he doesn't want to be subjugated to these the human I don't know, matrix. I can't think of the right word.
Yeah, they're sort of like a perfect foil for each other, and they both are like, you know, to be heady about it, right? But they're both the characters are saying something about humanity, right? One is like that we're this like really complicated and like sort of beautiful set of creatures, and the other one is like, this is like so base and horrible and limited, you know, like to want to have the cognizance to like want something and then realize that you can't get it, you know. So they're good foils for each other, but they're both like coming at humanity in these different ways, which is pretty cool.
And he's helping him overcome some of his depression, almost, right? He helps him with some
I'm depressed,
some food.
He says.
How many chocolate sundaes does he order?
10 chocolate sundaes, I think. But Data's like, yeah, when Troy is upset, she has a chocolate sundae.
Yeah.
So it's like, give me 10 of
like
those.
that must do something. Yeah.
Yeah. I get it.
Yeah.
A really well,
Relatable.
like, classic TV writing at the end of the episode, they bring him the sundaes and he goes, I lost my appetite. Yeah. Very silly. But we also get, in that scene, we get some, I think some catharsis, right? Because Guinan's there.
Yep.
And they're like, is he telling the truth? Is he not? And she stabs him.
Yeah, that's great.
Oh, he's telling the truth. But we see him like kind of, so he's got the hunger, the sadness there. In the previous scene, he was trying to help out Geordi on the bridge, but that's where he experiences like a backache. And Crusher's got to come check him out. I like that, just like the whole crew, after having deal with him, having to deal with him in previous episodes, they have to deal with him now, where they're like all almost like babysitting him. You know,
yeah. It's like he's still annoying, but now they have to like take care of him.
But also,
yeah, he's like even worse now that he's not threatening at all. You know,
but they're all also like, maybe he's threatening, you know, like
they don't trust him.
We get to see he always has good interactions with Worf, you know. And I like Worf initially gets to throw him in the brig, which is also satisfying because he's what's he always say? He calls him like macro head
brain,
micro
brain, or
what's he say to him?
He comes up, he's like growl for me or something.
Yeah, I think it might. And was it in this episode, or it might even be back in?
Yeah, I'm not sure which one, but
Well, there was another one. I'm not sure what episode it is in, but like he says to Worf, "Eat any good books lately?"
I don't remember all of these good one-liners. I feel like either they went above my head or they were in a different episode, but I like them a lot too.
Another part, like Worf has a very good Q moments because he's the most like, why do we have to deal with this shit?
Totally.
There's one.
I love Worf for that. I love Worf for that.
Back when he was trying to recruit Riker, I remember he steals them all down to a planet, abducts them all down to a planet to do some war games, but he gives them all lemonade, and Worf they go to, or I think everyone maybe gets what they like most.
Yeah.
Like Data is like whatever the fluid he consumes or something, and they cut to Worf.
He gets like the milk from Alien.
Yeah. So they cut to Worf and he just pours his drink out. It's so good.
I have garnered such an appreciation for Worf over time.
Oh, yeah.
But like having known his backstory and like more about him, now I can appreciate him, especially in like episodes like this where he's just like, fuck this.
Yeah, he has such a great
This
presence in
sucks.
episodes where he's not the key figure. That's what I love about him.
Yeah.
So we also learn about in this are they called the calamarians? I think that's what I wrote down. Was that how it's pronounced?
I don't remember them
what is
saying
this?
that, but that's totally possible that in context.
Yeah.
It was.
McKenna, what do you think about their whole deal?
They're upset with Q, probably because Q claims he hasn't done anything to him, but he probably has.
We know
He
has,
certainly
right?
has. Yeah, I've been thinking about how this pairs with like the previous episode where Q shows up and he's like, I want to be on your crew. You need me. You're not ready for what's out there. But I'll I'll not use my powers to be on your crew if you want. But then this episode, he's in here and he's like, oh, my powers were taken away from me, but can I be on your crew? But he also now needs them, and he's they're kind of protecting him from this other alien.
Yeah, it's really good. Like and as the plot kind of develops, it's really good like writing. I think from a just like a TV sort of like not thriller, but you're sort of like it all like fits together so nicely the way their characters develop, and that's such a good that's totally a great moment where now he totally needs them to babysit, like you said, and look out for him.
Yeah.
And I like you mentioned where he's like he can't use his powers. That reminds me when they're trying to do something with the moon, and he's like, "Yeah, you simply just need to like, what does he say?
Change the gravitational pull of the universe or whatever." Yeah.
Yeah, we can do that.
And he says it so like, "Oh, you just got to do this." Like, it is interesting to see him thrust into the situation because he is like omnipotent, super smart. But it would be like almost like taking someone and being like, use this like really old like technology. You know what I mean? Like he's just so like evolved beyond it that he can't even fully interface with it. He overcomes it a little, but we have with the writing though. I think there's a good like progression where they have this, and where he needs to be protected by them, and he does literally get protected by them. Data, who's been watching over him, saves him, and this causes Q to almost have like a change of heart, where he's considering it, and he's like, I would never have done anything to protect him, So it's sort of like Data. It's very apropos. Like Data of all people shows him like, what their values are all about.
Right. Empathy and values. Yeah,
It's
cool. It's a really well written episode. It feels like really like circular, and it feels like it's like, I don't know. It feels like the scope was weirdly small for like, still having Q in it and everything, which like inherently makes the scope like way bigger and like the big questions of the universe and whatever. But yeah, I thought that the writing, especially with Data, was really good.
Yeah, like it's believable, I think, when Q is like saving the day in the end, right? He's like, as long as I'm on the ship, these non-corporeal life forms are going to keep fucking with me and cause all these people to die, so I'm going to sacrifice myself. It's like, oh, wow, okay. But then they kind of pull it away at the very end a little bit, right? They pull the tablecloth out in a fun way. because we get it's credited as Q2 who shows up. Such a good introduction when this other Q shows up when Q's sacrificing himself, and he just shows up on the shuttlecraft, and they're like, Q? Like they're just both called Q.
Q.
But they're like, yep, okay, you've paid your debts, you can come back in to the continuum. All right, okay.
Yeah, it ended well for Q after all that.
And we get this little like celebration at the very end where he's fucking with everybody again, right?
Yeah, back to good old Q.
He's got a mariachi band. He gives Riker and Worf maybe some ladies. I can't remember. He's got some babes, right?
There are babes there for sure.
Oh, and then Picard's about, they're about to take off in the end. He gives him the cigar or whatever, Gotcha.
And then he gives Data laughter.
Oh my god, yeah.
Right.
Data
I forgot about that.
It's really disturbing almost how hard he laughs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody's just like, what is happening?
There's something
that's worth looking that up if you haven't seen this. It's worth looking that part up. I can't believe I almost forgot about that.
There's something so sad about it when they're like, Data, what are you laughing at? And he just goes,
I don't know.
You're like, aw.
Yeah.
They're the most powerful force in the universe. Now the Borg have the most destructive plan ever to conquer the human race.
You have committed acts of aggression against the United Federation of Planets.
Target 1, the Enterprise.
Directed, Det 9.
Geordi, evacuate engineering.
Target 2, Captain Picard.
Your culture will adapt to service ours.
We would rather die.
The final target.
Earth.
On the next exciting episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Take a drink of water here.
Yeah, you're gonna need it. We're getting into the real meat and potatoes here.
What does Data say? Q asks him if like whatever like oil he drinks or whatever is good, and he goes, "It's more appropriate to say that it is good for me."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I feel that way about things, Data. I understand that.
Yeah.
All right, now let's talk about the episode. This is the episode that really put TNG like solidly on the map, like set it aside from the original series and kind of let it grow into like the sensation that it really was, like from a more mainstream perspective. That is the best of both worlds, which was both season 3 episode 26 and season 4 episode 1. They aired June 18th, 1990, and then like 3 months later, September 24th, 1990. I guess we'll talk about that maybe a little bit more, but we had a bit of a cliffhanger here and a bit of a wait time, but leading us into season 4. It was written by Michael Piller, who he wrote a couple great episodes before this that we have not discussed, but we'll talk about. But this is obviously a massive episode for him. I don't know if it was due to this, but around the same time, I think maybe even before, he became an executive producer / like showrunner on the show, and he would help create Deep Space Nine and Voyager. He was like the creator of those shows. He wrote their pilot episodes, so. Obviously, like after writing this, they put a lot of faith into him, and it was directed by Cliff Bowl, who I believe we discussed before. And the Memory Alpha synopsis is: the Borg begin an invasion of Federation space much sooner than was expected. With the Enterprise unable to affect them, the Borg capture Captain Picard and turn him into one of their own. So. Yeah, this is like, I like how it starts where it's like we've seen the Borg before, we know what they're about, and they're just like they tease it a little bit at first, but there is sort of just this idea of like the episode starts, the music and the feel is way different. They're like, shit is going down here, and it does not take long for them to be like, the Borg are back, you know.
Yeah.
What was when you started watching this, Adriel, did you have did you catch the vibe pretty quick, or how did you feel about it?
I could tell. So I knew that this was going to be a two-parter, and I knew that this it had to be a cliffhanger because it was season 3 and then season 4. And yeah, unlike previous, like the cadence of this episode was already like very, very different from the jump, because it felt much more like, it kind of felt like what I expected Star Trek to be like before I started really watching it, which is more like action, or like action and horror. And like, I think that like, it's crazy to think back. I've come so far, but when I first started like watching these, I was like, oh, right. Like they just kind of talk, and like that doesn't all end up in like a violent altercation all the time, you know? And but this particular one, although there is violence and the threat of violence that happens like a lot, and actual violence, however, and body horror. But this one like really does feel like it opens with like, oh, violence is on the table. Like action is going to happen in this episode. So yeah, so immediately the cadence was quite different, which is I think what you were saying as well.
Yeah, like I mean, I don't know, McKenna, how you feel, but like this type of episode isn't necessarily always my favorite, but one thing I like about Star Trek is that it has all these different moments, and like especially as like I always can appreciate it as like a big season finale or something. Like let's have a big like sort of like galactic scale, or not galactic, I guess. Well, with the Borg you could say galactic, but this large scale,
I think it's galactic
situation, big, almost like war like situation, right? Like this is a good episode for that. We are introduced to some characters here early on who are sort of our Starfleet connection, like that's sort of telling them what's going on. So we've got Admiral Hansen here and Lieutenant Commander Shelby. Admiral Hansen was played by George Murdoch, who played God in Star Trek V. More on that some other
Say
time.
no more.
And Elizabeth Dennehy, I think, amazingly portraying this Lieutenant Commander Shelby character, daughter of Brian Dennehy.
Whoa.
Yeah, just
who's that? Who's Brian?
What's his big
I'm looking him up because now I want to know.
There was one that was totally slipping my mind. It's not what he's like well, he is critically acclaimed for it, but it's not what he's been awarded for, because he's a Tony and Golden Globe and Primetime Emmy Award winner. But I think of him as he is the cop in the first Blood movie, the first Rambo movie. And I believe he's Romeo's father in Romeo plus Juliet.
That's why he looked so. Yes.
I feel bad. I blanked on that, but I had all movies. He's in some good shit. Let's just say. But
nice. Okay.
And he also had a daughter who is a great actress in her own right.
Got it now.
But yeah, that's what's kind of cool about this is, I mean, it's this big battle episode. It's this big Borg episode. People obviously remember it being a big Picard episode because of Locutus of Borg or whatever, but it is the ultimate Riker episode in actuality.
Totally.
I think, well, no, both parts, but I feel like episode 1 has a lot of the setup for it. But yeah, this is, I think, out of anyone, it's kind of a good ensemble episode as well. But what do you think? Riker, he's kind of our standout character.
Yeah, they got the thing again where it's like he's been offered a captainship.
Yes. And this was part of, they were actually trying to address that some more, because it was like kind of a complaint they would hear often from fans of like, well, why won't Riker like take, we saw in the previous run of episodes that episode with his dad where they were trying to push him, and they say in this episode, this is your third time offered a captaincy, and So I think it was both taking like kind of something everyone had on their mind and like making a really great episode out of it.
Yeah, it's pretty clear that they like were it seemed like they were addressing, if not fan, issues or, complaints, but just like their own issues in the writers room as well, because it from the very beginning of the episode, they were like people are like, well, what's your deal? Like, why don't you want to do this? And he does not give a satisfying answer, which to me, I was like, well, I don't know if they have a satisfying answer, right? Like, part of the problem with this is that like we like want to keep him, we want him on the show, but it doesn't really make sense in terms of the universe that they've built and the values that Starfleet like has. Like, what does it mean to be somebody who like doesn't want to be the captain, like wants to be but doesn't want to leave and still wants to be number one but not the captain? Like, what is that? Can they even stand for that, in this like world that they've built? So yeah, I was like somewhat satisfied by the answer to that, but yeah, I still definitely had some, like, of course, like we have no doubt that he'd be a great captain,
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I still feel like at any point he could change and decide to be a captain. Like, he doesn't want to leave, but yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's a bit unresolved to me.
Okay, yeah, that is interesting. Like, because it was sort of their answer to it, but it is interesting because then he goes, you've got another, spoilers here, but another 4 seasons of him just hanging on the ship, being first officer, and
right.
So is it the end of his stories lines? I don't know. What do you do with Riker? We'll see.
Yeah.
But I like. Well, we talked about it a little bit with the episode with his dad, but the scenes with Troy, or I guess in this case, it's just one scene with Troy, is kind of a good standout scene in the episode where he's just kind of like she's kind of like his Guinan, right, where he's gonna like he can confide all this stuff in her, and I like that sort of, they have a really good chemistry, I think, where
definitely,
where she calls him seasoned or whatever, and he's like, that's the worst thing you could say to a man.
Yeah, he's like worried, like, oh, have I lost my touch? Like, I'm not like really a renegade anymore. I'm more like by the book.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, McKenna, about Riker's decision? We're kind of jumping ahead, but just that idea of his decision to stay as a first officer, not take a captain's chair. Do you feel unresolved?
Not necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
Like, to me, he doesn't seem like, like old enough that it's like he has to do this. Like, he's running out of time. He doesn't feel like he's running out of time to be a captain. Like, they say he's seasoned, but he still feels like
they're long-lived in this.
Yeah.
Right.
He could be a first officer for a little longer and, still be good to be a captain in a few years. I mean, yeah. And
we have some benefit of foresight.
Foresight, yeah.
Right.
He does okay for himself, but I think what might make it feel unresolved is there's less of like an outward expression of this, and I think it's due to like something that's like they're in the like sort of like a military thing together, but I think it's this idea of like he has like sort of this love and camaraderie with his shipmates that he just doesn't have, that he wouldn't have elsewhere, and that it just doesn't feel like for him the time to move on from like these people. And like I think it's due, and I think this is good, like I don't think the characters should be going around being like, I love you, I love you, I love you, I kind of like that it's more implicit, you know what I mean, like you feel their connection, even though he's not gonna give Patrick Stewart a hug and Be like, you're my bro.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty clear that like that's why he's staying. So I think that like part of what feels unsatisfying and I think by design, but like he never, like he always does his best and he never throws it. He never is like, oh, well, I can't leave because he never purposefully messes up so that he can't leave. And it's like, we all know that he'd be like really, really good in service to the rest of like the galaxy, and that like people's like he could make a huge impact if he decided to like, become a captain of a different ship, because he is very good at his job and very good at decision making. And so there's something that feels sort of selfish about him deciding to stay.
Yeah.
Because it feels like you got into this because I mean, I guess I don't know why he got into it, right? But it's like the values of Starfleet are right. Yeah, right. Because his dad bullied him into it, I guess.
I almost think there's something nice about that aspect of like his dad always pushed him and pushed him almost too hard, right? He kind of like he bullied his son, and there's something almost nice about like him not having this like he doesn't necessarily need to have the highest ambitions, and he can be like, oh, I found like this thing I really love to do, and maybe I'll move on someday, but right now I'm just killing it as first. And we see here he gets to plenty of situations. He gets to kind of be co-captain. I think that's something that I've transferred onto the man Jonathan Frakes himself. Like that's something he has to do a lot, especially in the movies and some of the ones where he directs, where he has to like. They almost always give him like his own little situation that he has to be in charge of. So he's like, he's like co-captain. It's kind of nice, but he's like, I'm not going to hog the spotlight. That's for Patrick, Mm-hmm. He's his perfect wingman.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that also like, I think because like it doesn't feel like there's a real plausible threat that he's ever actually going to leave. And I think that that's part of what I'm picking up on, is that like, to me, I'm like, just say you're not going to go. Just say that, like just put it off the table. Say like, I'm a career first officer or whatever. Like, that's what I'm doing. Like, I'm not applying for this job,
Yeah.
So it feels sort of like not disingenuous, but it feels almost just like, just drop it. Like, just let him like, like, be more clear to everybody that like you're not planning on leaving, but yes, because I'm like he's there. It doesn't feel like, it feels like there's a bit of conflict of like, well, there's external pressure for me to leave, but like everybody on the ship kind of wants me to stay and I want to stay, but it doesn't feel like he's ever really like threatening to leave. It's and this I guess is a good segue into what's Shannon?
Shelby.
Shelley.
It's an interesting thing to like look at the career ladder in a world where they've gotten rid of money. So like that's not the motivation for moving up. It's I want this job?
Yeah.
And I think that it like, I don't think he knows if he's ready to make the decisions that he'll have to make as a captain, which is something we're going to see later in this in this two-part.
Just to piggyback off that a little bit, and it'll lead into Shelby, but I will say I think part 2 shows like he could be captain, and that they kind of took upon, I think, the ethos of the show of like we can figure something else out, because there is this whole idea of like we need to let Picard go and move on, and now Riker's the captain of the ship and it's the Riker show, and I think that's kind of the unspoken thing where I think it's like we can do it another way. We can keep our boy alive, we can keep my guy alive, and I can keep like making sure that as long as Picard is doing his thing, that I can support him, because he's the man. We got to protect Picard.
He is the man, dude. He's the man.
But yeah, you don't have to worry anymore. I think we're done with will Riker leave the ship or whatever after this. So think we're
Sweet.
we're set there. Yeah. But Shelby, is a perfect foil for him in this, because like everyone else is trying to push him like from the top down, and she's a lieutenant commander, and she's like, I'm gunning for your job. And
Yeah.
it's written really well, because she's been, since their encounter with the Borg, she's been like studying them, and so she's kind of like become the expert on the Borg. So they have a good like she's very useful, but also really competitive in a lot of ways with Riker. What did you think about the Shelby character?
Yeah, I think they definitely try to make her like an earlier version of Riker, where he's a little more like authority, challenging. I think now in the show, Riker and Picard have they have a lot of respect for each other, and if Riker doesn't agree with something, they'll still like talk it out. Where I think earlier in the show he was more like combative with Picard, and there's a little tension.
And Picard was like testing him, even in like the pilot. There's like episodes where he does the like do the saucer connection yourself. He like gives him little challenges.
Yeah. So yeah, she's kind of doing this now. She's like kind of pushing his buttons a little bit, going around the chain of command to Picard, and Riker is not happy about this.
They establish it in the way they establish a lot of classic character stuff in TNG, which is the poker game.
Yeah.
I
loved it.
This time Data's still got his he's doing some commentary and stuff, which is always fun. And Wesley is now at the poker table, which we don't need to talk about Wesley too much, but I know you haven't liked seeing this little boy grow up on the show, but he's in
it's weird, but I think that's a common, it seems like everybody feels that way.
Mm-hmm. But she like outbluffs him, right? She outbluffs Riker, which is just I think we saw the last time we watched, right? Didn't we see Riker at the time to pluck a pigeon, where I think Riker bluffed Data, right? So there's sort of a one-upsmanship thing going on here. She, early bird gets the worm. She goes down and starts scanning the Borg stuff without Riker. And you mentioned one of her plans, she goes over his head to Picard, because doesn't seem, at least, like he's into it. And I think they have a good like back and forth where like I don't know how you feel. I never fully feel like either one is like totally like out of line, you know what I mean? But you can see like why. They are in their own ways, but like you're not. I don't think you're ever like it never comes off as like, man, Riker's a dick, or Shelby's coming in here stepping on everyone's toes, right? You feel like that they have this very like understandable, like you kind of understand what both of them are getting at, and like but they do need to like learn to work together a bit more, right? It's not a clear like heel face type situation,
Yeah,
right.
Which I like that they were a good what do you call it, back and forth, good competition. But yeah, so the Borg, there's this sort of like tension. They're getting ready for the Borg. Again, Guinan plays another great part of this episode. She due to her previous connection, she plays a valuable role in sort of like advising them. But they get into it. They get into a battle like with the Borg, and Picard straight up gets kidnapped, and then they just start hightailing it to Earth. And so this was kind of an interesting situation, because now they're talking to the Admiral, and he's like, yeah, we're gonna head him off. And at this it's kind of this very important moment in Star Trek history. This is the Battle of Wolf 359. And it's something I appreciate about the show. We kind of skip past it a little bit in the episode where Q introduces them to it, but Q, due to their interaction with the Borg, like 40 people on the ship die, and they really sell that as like, this is a horrible thing. I feel like that's something that sometimes you don't often get in certain types of space fantasy, sci-fi, whatever stuff, where like one person dying can be a big deal. I guess we talked about that a little.
Huge loss, yeah.
And so now here, to see like this is a crazy sight, I think, for Star Trek when they eventually get to Wolf 359 and they discover like the wreckage of all the ships and everything, and it's like all these people died, including the admiral that we were just talking to. Hansen was his name, right? And so I don't know. I thought that's like, I think they do a good job of selling it, and I mean it comes up again and again in Star Trek, but it's mainly for the reason of they always got like the Borg are such a big deal, like culturally, that they're like, we got to make something with the Borg in it. But I think they do a good job of, this is like a pivotal event in the future history of Starfleet, right?
Yeah. Thinking of like one specific thing, but
for in later on.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. We'll talk about that.
In the is this in TNG, or is that it's like does it have implications like in further
series?
Like,
yeah.
Even further. Okay, I see. Yeah, I mean it's like it's one of the things that I've grown to like understand and really like care about. It's violence always being like the last resort, and so there's like a lot of gravity when they're like fire all the stuff, and there's a part I think in the second part of it where they're like firing, and it's like you fire everything that we have. That's like not something that they ever would do under normal circumstances. And we like in the next episode that the last episode we'll talk about later, but that this is something that like really haunts Picard.
Oh yeah.
It's like something that is like really like sticks with him and haunts him and has like PTSD from it. I think would be kind of a more like prosaic way to talk about it, but like
totally,
it's really like something that is not. I like that this show is able to, I don't know, they talk about these things without them being like this huge thing can happen that is like has a lot of impact and gravity like on the characters and on the world itself, but it's not even the focal point, but it's just like casualties and like all of the shrapnel that comes from war is like really, it's real, and it has all these impacts without it even being the main focus.
Yeah.
It's very cool.
Yeah, it comes up. It'll come up from time to time with Picard. Even a movie is based on this sort of thing, and some of they do run it into the ground actually. But we don't have to talk about that. They first discover that Picard has been Borgified. He's been made into Locutus because they go over to the ship. And I at last minute I read this detail because you know what I'm going to talk about with Crusher.
Oh, that wasn't what I was thinking. I was thinking first they just find his clothes.
They find his clothes.
Yeah.
This is where
yet another Picard moment here.
Oops, all my clothes are anymore. In the drawer. And this coffee is all over me.
Yeah.
Crusher goes over on the away mission, and I don't remember I think I had read that she said to the writer or something like, hey, I want to go over on the ship or whatever, and he's like, okay. So he put that in.
She said she wanted to like fire a phaser or something.
Yes, that's it.
Right, yeah.
But it's really clever because she goes, let's think of it from the mosquito's perspective, and it's like, oh, she starts thinking about it like biologically, like that's pretty cool. But we haven't really talked about that, but that's kind of one like freaky thing about the Borg is you can kind of like hang out around them and they don't really come after you unless they like think you're a threat. And so like if you're just like walking around on their ship, they're like, yeah, whatever, you know. Like they're full scale tearing civilizations out of the ground, you know, and like their whole cities and stuff. So like whatever, a couple of people like we just don't even notice them until they start biting like a mosquito.
Right. And they like it's like unless they are trying to extract resources from you or that they see you as a threat, like otherwise like they don't. That's again part of what's so scary about them because they're very unpredictable that way, you know.
Yeah. What'd you think about the reveal of Locutus of Borg?
Made me sad. First thing I was like, oh, man. I mean, I know that he'll come back. Picard has to come back, but I was like, Picard is my favorite character of all of them. I mean, that feels like obvious. That's like saying like Mickey Mouse is my favorite Disney character or something. But like, he's my favorite. He's just period. He's my favorite. So I was very like, I was like, you can't do this to Picard. Like, I wasn't even really worried about. I mean, I knew that felt like the ship was in good hands with Riker. I felt like it was going to be okay.
Yeah.
But I was not worried. I was more worried about them not being able to get Picard back. You know, it was just so anyway, yes, I was sad about it. It was very freaky. And I didn't like, obviously I have to like take Patrick Stewart and Jean-Luc Picard. They're separate people. One is fictional, whatever. But I was like, just don't make him play somebody else. I want him to be Picard. Don't make him be this weird Borg.
When they're like doing the surgeries, they're like, turn down his saturation, and he cries a little bit. That's scary. Yeah. That's the body horror thing where it's like your consciousness is like still in there.
Aware.
Yeah.
It's freaky.
Yeah.
What do you think? Locutus, now, you know, you've got a lot of
like
Trek under your belt.
It's like horrifying because up to this point, like the Borg are just kind of faceless. They're just like bodies. Like no one knows any of them. But then he shows up, and it's like that we know this person.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. We look up to this person, but he's standing against us now, and we can't get through to him.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll talk. Riker has his ways, which I think is cool. That's in part 2, which I'll set up here in a sec. But I want to talk a little bit about this cliffhanger. Also, I like when Picard says, "I will resist you with every fiber in my being," or whatever. It's such an awesome line where he's just like talking shit to them or whatever.
Yeah.
But
so awesome.
Yeah, you were like, is the ship in good hands with Riker? Like, we were all either newborns or not born when this aired. We're young Trekkies, relatively speaking, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm young, just so everyone knows.
I was an iPad kid. Don't look at me.
And I guess I should have pulled more of this, but I've heard, different things. Like this, there was a big cliffhanger, and it ends with Riker's fire, and I think now with hindsight, just knowing the show, it's like, yeah, it's gonna be okay. But I think with some people, there probably was a genuine like, is the show gonna change now? Because you never know. Sometimes with these shows, they will eventually, like, characters will need to leave, and they'll write them off and stuff. So,
yeah, it's true.
I don't know. I love a good season end cliffhanger. I guess you have to know the show's gonna come back, right? For it to.
Yeah. The thought of that, like, not being renewed, it's just like, oh, geez.
It's disturbing. Yeah.
Next time on Star Trek: The Next Generation. You once knew him as Picard, captain of the Starship Enterprise, but now he's half man, half machine, a deadly pawn of the evil Borg. His mission, to destroy Earth and anything or anyone who gets in his way. It's the showdown of the 24th century on the next exciting episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Let's talk about part 2. I'll just say I have the synopsis from Memory Alpha for that too. With Captain Picard assimilated by the Borg, the enemy is able to totally obliterate a Starfleet armada at Wolf 359, leaving Riker in command of the Enterprise and forced to go one-on-one with his former captain. So great. It's like a different sort of vibe now, because when it fails, it comes back, and when it fails, Riker has this crazy look on his face. I think it's amazing acting, where he was prepared to accept the death of his captain, him killing him, but then when it fails, he has like this like he looks disturbed, and he looks genuinely shook by Locutus. I love it. It's so good.
He has this conversation with Guinan.
Yes.
Where she's telling him, like, you were ready to kill, like, Locutus, but you have to be ready to let go of Picard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Classic Guinan stuff here, where she's like, because she has dealt with the Borg, as we know, and it says a lot that her, like, being kind of the person, like, she says it, me and him have a bond that goes beyond whatever. It's just, that's good shit.
Classic Guinan, always keeping us in perspective.
But I like this because he's captain now, and he has to work with Shelby as his first officer, and he is slow to at first, like, he's trying to do the things he would normally do, but Troy actually again kind of is like, no, you got to stay and be captain, and Guinan helps with that too. And honestly, I mean, I think this was kind of I liked watching him and Shelby sort of, like, learn to overcome this together and, like, start to strategize and stuff. It was like, and it was done in a way where it has that little bit of, they obviously there's a lot of tension, but it has that sort of thing of, like, that I think was in Gene Roddenberry's mind, if, like, these are both Starfleet officers and they can, like, learn to work together and overcome, like, this difference. And it was done in a very satisfying way, and it led them to victory, let's just say. But I feel like it starts to fade away towards the end of this episode as being, like, what it's all about,
Yeah, I mean, in some ways I kind of wish that she wasn't in the in the episode, which maybe is a hot take, but I like wanted, I don't know, I feel like they could have, I because Picard's absence is, like, so it's such a focus of the episode, and it's such a focus of the whole, like, season, and he's the leader, and he's gone now, and I just felt I was sort of, like, distracted by her in some way, because, like, there's this, like, undercurrent of, like, will Riker, like, leave, or, like, does he want to leave, and all of that. But I think that, like, they could have done it without her. They could have written it without her in it, and so I felt a little bit like I didn't mind how they did it. Like, the way that they handled her character was like fine, and it was satisfying, but I just was like, this is so much about the Enterprise and about how it would operate, like, without Picard anymore, or, like, if he was just, like, dead and gone or whatever, or if he became a Borg, that I just was like, man, you don't even know Picard, lady, like, you like, these stakes are not the same for you, so there was a part of me that was like, man, I wish she wasn't like taking up airtime here, because I felt like Riker could have had his own, like, he could have been dealing with the same issues, like, if she hadn't even been there. So that was like,
I guess
that was my one feeling about it.
What kind of makes it all work, I think, for me, is that it's like, and they have the whole scene where he's like, Data, I know you don't have ambition, but sorry, Worf, sorry. And I think what I like about it is, like, yeah, he could have just, like, kept his homies, close, but he had to basically be like, we established in the first episode, she is, like, the new Riker, and she's, like, stepping on his toes, and I like that he had to be like, okay, you're the new Riker, and I have to be the new Picard, basically. And I think having that outside force kind of pushing against him, I think that's what kind of tied it all together, tied the room together.
Right. That rug really tied the room together. I think that when I was watching it because I was considering it, like as I was watching it, I was like, why don't I like her that much? And I was like, oh well, like maybe it'd be better without her there. But I mean, I do think that you are correct in saying that like there wouldn't be like, it would be more of a scramble or like a loss or like this. It would be a totally different episode if she wasn't in there as this like kind of grounding force to be like, this is like because she is not like she's not really a member of the Enterprise and she's not a character who like knows and loves Picard in the way that everybody else does. Like she really is able to like add momentum to the rest of the writing of the 2 episodes. So I could see that she really like does play an important part in the momentum of the show, because otherwise I feel like they could have been a little bit lost in the sauce without her.
Yeah, McKenna, you mentioned you made me think of the sort of connection that Riker and Picard have, and I think like Riker's kind of, I love those little scenes where he's talking to Locutus and he does those little things of like, well, Picard would trust me implicitly, and since you have the entirety of his breadth of like knowledge and experience, you should trust me implicitly. And I like that they were able to like play on that aspect of like their connection. It wasn't all just like, I'm fighting this guy who looks like him. It's like, oh, he partially is him still inside, or at least he has his experience. And it has a lot of like little payoffs. Like they eventually go and they kidnap him. They bring Locutus back, and I like where he's like, I knew you would do this, number one. Bad play, or whatever. He's like he's like shit talking him.
That's awesome.
But we also get a little bit. I like it here where he talks to Worf. Locutus talks to Worf, and he sort of gives a little. I think he sort of gives a little bit. I think it's in that scene where you kind of get a little bit of Borg justification of what they're doing, where he's like, yeah, we're gonna like, we just want to elevate everybody, like, and it sort of makes me think of like you can kind of think of it as like sort of the justification of like, American global empire of like, well, we're just helping everyone, they need to all assimilate to our culture and do things the way we do, and we're gonna probably kill a lot of them. And
but it's better this way.
Yeah.
It's better this way.
I don't know, I don't know. I wonder if that was the sort of intention, because I could also see I don't know, like there's a lot of different ways to interpret that sort of thing, but at least that's the way it feels to me, especially when they were trying to sort of have, well, in a way, all the alien cultures are a stand-in for America in different aspects, especially Starfleet. So it's hard to say. It really depends on the writer, especially, but it really came across, at least in that moment. But yeah, they got Locutus and they hack into his brain. They hook Data up to his brain. What do you, McKenna? What did you think about the payoff here? Or they're like, oh, we can input a command into him. Was that? Do you think that was I think that was pretty.
Yeah. They're kind of, I guess they like figure out that there is like some sort of structure to the Borg.
Yeah.
Where they have different levels of ship function and how it's prioritized. And you get this like moment where Picard is kind of becomes lucid.
Oh yeah.
And he says sleep.
They're like, oh, he needs sleep.
Yeah.
This whole setup, actually, it was pretty cool. They had like O'Brien's monitoring this and Crusher's monitoring his thing. They're in the room,
but they're still like, we don't know if this is gonna work.
Yeah, and they're like, when should we turn it off, Data? And he's like, I don't know.
Yeah, they're like, we're like at the highest level of what we do, and we're doing our best, but we do not know if this is gonna be enough.
Yeah, but they do.
Yeah,
they tell him to sleep, and then they just fucking blow the shit out of him.
I know, that was pretty tough.
But what did you think about the ending, Adriel?
I really loved them hacking. Like, okay, so there are a lot of aspects of Star Trek that are like magical, basically. I mean, like the holodeck, and like you can write it off as being like, this is future technology, it's technologically, but it is like magic basically for us. And the same with the replicator or whatever. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Where they can replicate anything, and that's how they're able to like not need money and stuff. Anyway, I really liked that for the Borg. It was like some like hackers ass like command line, like 90s like actual computer stuff that was like that the Borg are using technology from like 1988 or whatever. It's like pretty sick.
Yeah. Oh, I love
and
it.
I love that specific kind of sci-fi and that like hackers kind of Johnny Mnemonic thing. It's like it's one of my favorite brands. So when that was how they were able to like kind of like dig in there and figure out like, oh, we have to like change the command line or the file name or whatever, like that was just, there was something really satisfying about that for me, because I love that, but also because it just felt like, oh, actually they're like quite simple. There is like this like file structure that they have that was, prevalent in the 1900s, in humanity. So there was something cool about that I really liked. And then I liked that they just destroyed them, which is again sort of like uncharacteristic of like Star Trek, but it was so tight.
Yeah. It's like, well, what are you going to do at that point,
Yeah, exactly.
Well, they're right by Earth, too. That's something we didn't really talk about, but
yeah.
they go, like, they're right outside Earth, which they go to it a lot, especially in the movies, because, like, they're like, we want to ground it something familiar. But that, in this episode, it does actually make it kind of scary when you see them cruising by Saturn or whatever. So it's like, they gotta blow the shit out of them, or else it could be bad.
Yeah.
They're gonna wake up.
I was so happy they did. Because they also are like, they are computers. They are like not, which I know like Data is a computer, right?
But we saw Picard
like,
crying underneath, right?
I know.
Well, they'll get into that more later on, but the episode,
because they're also babies.
There's
they're
babies on there.
There's babies on the ship too. So I don't know. A little complicated too.
We'll address that more in the future.
Yeah.
But it has a really fucked ending where Picard's looking out the window, and it's like, oh shit, he's fucked for life now,
And it's still like, this isn't. I guess we don't know this, but like this isn't all the Borg.
It's not all the Borg, yeah.
No way.
Like,
that's one Borg
it's like,
ship.
we just put them to sleep. What do we do? Like, we no longer have like a guy we can hack into to take down the rest of the Borg.
Yeah, so a threat.
It's still a threat, yeah.
No, this might be a peak Borg, I gotta say, but we'll see. We'll see. There's some other good stuff.
Next time on Star Trek: The Next Generation, Picard faces his most difficult mission, the long journey home.
Seem to have made a rather disturbing discovery.
A family reunion takes a twisted turn,
What the devil happened to you up there?
turning brothers into bitter rivals.
I even enjoyed bullying you. Damn you!
A tragic homecoming on Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Let's it's another long episode. I'm sorry. But let's
we don't have to, we can try to breeze through this.
We're gonna breeze through
bit.
it. No, well, this is nice. It's a little bit of the fallout of the last episode we just discussed, but we're talking here Family, season 4, episode 2, from October 1st, 1990, written by Ronald D. Moore. We discussed as the Klingon guy, among other things, and directed by Les Landau. And the description here is: Captain Picard takes leave on Earth and visits his family while recovering from his assimilation into the Borg. Worf's human parents visit the Enterprise and help him deal with his discommodation. And it doesn't even talk about
Wesley.
Here that Wesley gets a little message from his dad.
He gets a family plot line too.
So we'll talk about that first, because we're going to go from least to most important. We got Doug Wirt here playing Jack Crusher, and like a little message from Wesley. that they're back on Earth, and Beverly was cleaning out the storage and found this. I don't know. Adriel, what do you think? What do you think about the message from Wesley's dad, from Jack to Wesley?
I liked it.
Yeah.
I was I thought they did a good job with it. It was sad and sweet and really well written. Wesley's a total weirdo, but I liked his dad, and I thought that it was you could have a whole movie just about that.
Yeah.
That whole thing. But I really liked it. I really liked the freaky holodeck room or whatever. I liked when Wesley is like, upload file Crusher 01.
Yeah.
And I liked the actor, and I thought I liked it.
Doug.
And then at the end when Wesley reaches out to touch him,
yeah.
and then he goes away.
Yeah. I thought it was handled pretty well. There's a couple things it was cool. It's a miniature version of let's get an actor in here to portray a character and do a little piece on them, more so I think than it was a Wesley thing, but I kind of felt a lot what he was saying. There's almost there's something almost you don't always get it from the Starfleet side of things. There's something almost spiritual when he's I don't know how to explain it, but I can feel you're my son, and there's something like that felt real to me.
Yeah.
I don't know. You got any feeling on Jack Crusher?
I think it's kind of an interesting thing to do after a lot of people just died in the Borg episode, and they're doing this thing on a singular death that still has weight all these years later. So it kind of it's another aftermath thing, but from a different perspective.
Yeah.
It's he says in the recording this version of me doesn't exist anymore. And it's no version of you, this is the only version of you that
and he didn't do
exists.
Another recording.
Yeah.
Sad. It is.
Yeah.
You do kind of bring the bigger point with this whole episode. It is such a cool thing to do. I think the next episode after your big season finale / introduction, to not okay, let's do a quiet one. They do that a lot, but also kind of connect it to the previous episode and other episodes. I think this is kind of ahead of its time in a lot of ways, right? Where it was really just kind of a world building episode in a way, with a lot of character building stuff too, of course.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point, McKenna, about showing the long arm of loss and death, and it is a really good thing to bring up almost 20 years later, after this one person died, and then this is after all of these other people had just died in the previous episode, that it does it pulls a lot of thematic weight, I think.
So we got some Worf, and it's follow up to our Worf storyline, which is another reason I wanted to do Worf before, because I knew we were going to have to talk about this, and I wanted this to be in there. But we get Sergei and Helena Rozhenko, played by Theodore Bickle and Georgia Brown. Theodore Bickle, he is nominated for an Academy Award, so I don't remember which movie, so don't follow up, but basically what we're saying is they pulled out some big guns here, especially we'll talk about some other actors, but I thought they were cool, seeing Worf's human parents. I think they did a great job portraying that, and I don't know, Adriel, what do you think about Worf? We kind of get more of his, they're telling embarrassing stories. What do you think about this?
I loved it. I feel like it really, in the same way that it's in real life, right? When you meet people's parents and you're oh, that's why you are like this. Or this is what happened. Well, I love meeting people's parents. It's so fun for me, because I feel like I suddenly get all of the puzzle pieces fall into place for this person. And I have felt the exact same about Worf. I'm like, what a joy to get to like have that same experience with a character with a friend that I've made on TV, you know? And they were so sweet and so great. And I just, I really, really enjoyed this whole situation with his parents and them like being like embarrassing and like all together like too human for him. Which is like, it was they wrote it in a way that was like very heartwarming and sweet, which was different than, you know, other parts of the episode for sure. But like I was really happy that they kept it like somewhat uncomplicated, because it's already complicated just by Worf being Worf, you know, and like his, you know, will and desire to connect with like, you know, his like his heritage and his, you know, whatever, and he's sort of like shirking like humanhood and stuff. It just is, it's already complicated enough. And I think that I really liked that these were just like two sweet, embarrassing like Eastern European parents.
Yeah.
Know? So I liked it a lot.
Yeah, he wants to like bear his discommendation, you know, and you're supposed to kind of do it alone, and you know, not bring your family into it, and they don't care, you know, they love their son, you know.
Well, he also has this like, oh, they're humans, like they won't understand. I can't share this part of myself. Like this is a Klingon thing, where, you know, I think he finally gets here that like they don't have to fully understand what's going on with him to, you know, to offer, you know, some comfort.
And Guinan helps with it a little bit too. Again, classic
Guinan again.
She tells them about prune juice, which you haven't seen that scene, Adriel, but there's a famous scene that we'll eventually get to, that, speaking of Worf standing large in episodes he's barely even in. There's one episode he's only in one scene, but he drinks prune juice and it's great. But yeah, it's sweet. I also like his dad kind of, you know, he wants to talk shop with everyone about engineering and stuff. I've got all the diagrams, he says, but I love especially when he meets O'Brien and he's like, this fucking guy, you know, because O'Brien's not like a ranked officer. He's just like an enlisted man, you know? So he's like, yeah, this is the one it's really about, you know, doing this shit. So I like that he was like, that's what, you know, what I'm all about. It was sweet.
O'Brien played a really like sweet role in this. Like, I forget exactly what he says, but like at the beginning when he's like when Worf is preparing for his parents to come aboard, and he's like, oh, like my mom was here and she was like hitting on somebody or whatever, and Worf's like, my mom would never do that, and he's like, yeah, but parents are always up to something. It's like so cute, it's so sweet, like such a human like connection thing that like Worf like didn't like put together until like he said it, and he's like, yeah, I guess so.
That's what O'Brien's for. Yeah, just brings it down to
so
earth,
cute.
Salt of the earth type guy. Yeah,
yeah.
But the big thing with this episode is we also we get introduced to some more family. We get Renee, Marie, and Robert Picard, played by David Tristan Birkin. Plays the little kid. He comes back. He plays a young Picard in an episode.
Cute.
And we also get Samantha Egger, who is, I believe I read she's one of the 6 actresses on Star Trek who've been nominated for Best Female Lead in a Film at the Oscars. I don't know, again, I forgot which one. There's a lot of facts here, so, okay. But she also played Hera in the Hercules animated picture, so.
Wow.
That checks out. That really checks out. I'm like looking her up because as I was watching this, I was like, she looks so familiar.
She jumps
so
off
I'll get back
the
to you if she's in something else. Yeah.
But we also get Jeremy Kemp as his brother Robert. And so I don't know. I feel like this is pretty straightforward. He goes down and he's kind of estranged from his family. This is where a lot of the meat is, though. I think a lot of the emotional weight of the episode. I gotta say, I uncontrollably was crying during this episode, and it physically hurt me watching it.
Oh.
But what's the McKenna? What's the gist? I can't even describe it, or I'll die.
Well, Picard, comes to visit this vineyard, his family vineyard.
It's beautiful.
But him and his brother have some like long-standing tension that continues throughout this episode. I think his brother is a little resentful, maybe more than a little, of Picard. He grew up the older brother and kind of looked after him, but he always felt like he was just Picard's brother.
Mm-hmm. And he's more traditional.
Yes, he's always he's got these little microaggressions where he's like he'll be drinking the wine and he's like this way better than that synthahol stuff that you guys drink, or the real food is better than the replicated stuff.
Yeah, but it's a weird thing because like Picard, he reveals to us that he's maintained like a correspondence with his sister-in-law, but it sounds like he doesn't know her too well, outside of communicating with her like digitally or whatever. So he's been trying to she's been the one who's kind of helped maintain the connection between his brother's family and him and his nephew. And I don't know, I thought that was really touching in a way. Like I thought she was a very sweet character on her own. But Adriel, what did you think about their whole conflict?
Well, I really liked seeing him in like France or whatever, and having them like in these crazy, like I loved, first of all, he looks great in all the episodes, but he looks really good in this one.
Yeah.
Because he's got these like crazy like off-duty clothes that are like these like silky robe shirts that like I'm like I would wear that. Like that's a cool outfit. He looks awesome. And like seeing him kind of like just looking kind of like haggard and like sad and like really like traumatized from the Borg stuff that just happened. And then and I mean there's the part before he gets there with Troy, who's like, I don't know if this is like a great idea for you to like, after everything you just did, to like go back to your family, like that you haven't seen in 20 years. Like maybe it could be like a little bit traumatizing, or maybe open up some old wounds or whatever. But he's like, I'm going to do it anyway. And so that was like a really great like way to start the encounter, where you know that like there is potential for this to like feel really hard for Picard. But anyway, I really liked his brother, who was like, I mean, I thought it was funny. Obviously they were all speaking English, but they like have such a French, like kind of perhaps stereotypically French, like sensibility about them. It's just like so funny.
Yeah. I don't know if there's a canon reason why the French people are British, but, I think we can draw our own conclusions about what goes down in Europe in the next few hundred years.
Correct. No, but I think that like it's so perfect that his family is like, they don't have a replicator in the house, and like, they have they're like vineyard, like they like are farmers, and like they work on a vineyard, and they're these like, they have kept the house the same way for like generations and generations, it sounds like, which is just, they're so like sort of resistant to technology, or like at least the brother is, Robert or Robert or whatever,
because his son is very interested in, like, he did a project on starships, and Picard is like kind of encouraging him and stuff, and I feel like,
and he's like, don't encourage him.
You kind of get this immediate connection between him and Renee, like where they have like this sweet bond like immediately that is nice.
Yeah, and when he's like, he's like, they call it like, basically it was like, what does it mean to be like an arrogant son of a bitch or whatever?
Yeah.
It's so cute and fun. They have like such a sweet connection. Yeah, I mean, you can like see that there's this like, I don't know, there's like a sort of sadness of like the son of Robert who like wants him to like continue, like who like cares so much about tradition. And like, even though like Picard has never met his nephew, like the nephew is so like interested in adventures and like, you know, leaving Earth and like, you know, adopting this like all these new to boldly go, you know, like, and it's just sort of there's like a real sadness, I think, that is like very present in there because, you know, by the end of the episode, they're sort of like forward looking and hopeful about the son. Like he'll have lots of adventures, but like, you know, times are changing. And like, will this family, like, will this be the last generation of it? You know, who knows?
It does. Yeah. I wonder with the dad, if it's like, well, I basically had to raise my brother, or like protect him. And he was trying to do this and now I'm doing it all over again with my son, you know?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, to slightly jump ahead, but it's the ending specifically where he's like out sitting, like looking up into the stars, the little kid, and it's like there's something it's so like what's it like? Is schmaltzy the right word? You know,
no,
but
it's so
sweet. Yeah, but
it's sweet.
You also see Picard himself is like having that. He's kind of feeling the repercussions, and his brother kind of like digs in the wound a little bit of like kind of like the repercussions of like being adventurous and going out there, and you can kind of you see him. It's like a nice little storyline where he's like offered this other job where it's like he can still sort of do that thing but on Earth, like with the oceans, you know, like getting down there, and you can see him like contemplating like this could be my my way out, you know, stay safe, stay close to my family, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone, you know, everyone wants him, you know, and that pisses off his brother too. He's just like, God, like everyone just thinks you're so great. That's because he is. But
he is.
I'll tell you,
he's awesome.
The scene that really gets to me because it's such an incredible thing of like where they cycle through like so many different emotions rapidly. Where him and his brother finally have it out. And they start wrestling, and they're fighting in the mud. And at first, it's like scary. It's like tense, you know, like damn, they're fighting.
Yeah.
But then it turns, and you're like, oh, they're like brothers. They're like returning to like their childhood of fighting in the mud or whatever. And then they start laughing, and you're like, oh, that's sweet. And then he's like. Picard just switches on a dime and he's fucked up, and it just like really overwhelms me when he starts describing like what happened to him and stuff. And his brother, he doesn't even like sugarcoat it, where he's like, you're gonna deal with this for a long time. You're gonna have to deal with it, you know. And I was like, fuck.
Yeah, I loved that line that his brother was like, you're kind of fucked, but you'll deal with it. You know, you have to deal with it. This is going to stick with you.
But it was also the thing for his brother to kind of, like, obviously they kind of were laughing and whatever, but also seeing Picard sort of break down or whatever. He's like, you can kind of tell he's
humanizes him.
Yeah, he's like, that's my baby brother type thing. Yeah. Ugh. It gets me.
Yeah.
And then they come back and get sloshed.
Yeah, it's so cute. It's so cute when the wife comes in and she's like, they're like singing a little song together or whatever.
A little jaunty French tune or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great episode.
Yeah, this one was one of my favorites. Such a good one to end our watch party with. It was this is such a good episode. I really liked it a lot.
Yeah. It was a good episode. This has been a great episode. Thanks to both of you again for. I don't know why I thought, if we don't like step by step go through it, it won't take as long. But it just happens. There's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot to cover.
I'm sorry. I think for the next one.
No, I please don't be sorry. I love it a lot. I enjoy these very, very much. It's so fun to like, because I'm Like, yeah, I say this every time, but it's so great to be able to have a curated set of Star Trek episodes. So I hope that someone else is also following along and doing this, because it's really fun.
I think we did a good job, too, of describing it again. So hopefully, if you're listening and you're still curious and you still haven't watched it, you will watch some of these. This is a good place to jump in, I think, even if you don't know.
So awesome.
But I thought, okay, I've got a thing. Hopefully this is okay with everybody. But for our next episode, so we've gotten... Now, this was a big cultural moment for Star Trek. We didn't really fully hit on that, but this obviously is like a turning point for the series, the best of both worlds and the Borg. So we've gotten there. I thought, okay, let's take a step back. For our next episode, we are going to do a bit of a Spock trekking. Because I think kind of the before the Borg, the big thing that stands out in Star Trek is Captain Kirk, Spock, their whole thing, but Spock in particular. We talked about kind of I think one of the highlights of the storytelling of his character in the motion picture, but I've got a slate of episodes from the original series that I think we're
like the original one in the 60s.
The original series and some of the animated series that we're going to talk about for the next time.
Sweet. Oh, this is fun. Oh, I love this. This is great. Spock is like one of the few characters that I already that I knew about. Everybody knows about Spock, you know?
It's both to give us more context, but it's also going to eventually down the line, well, you'll see. It's going to lay foundations for other things in TNG and stuff like going down, like just wider Trek, nerd lore stuff. So, but also it will. I mean, you kind of have a good point of his arc already, but I think it's gonna show you, like kind of what establishes him as such a standout character in the first place. So that's what we're gonna do for next time. Yeah.
All right. I'm very excited about it.
I think we're good to go, yeah? I think we've settled all our business, and resistance is futile and all that, and see you later. I don't know, how did the Borg sign off? Bye. And we, of course, want to give a special shout out to our Millennium Star tier patrons. So thank you, Cyberlink420, Darren, Infection Form, Jeremy Aber, Kiefer, Nico Sylvian, Paul, and Underline V. You can find more at patreon.com/flashback64.